everybody! We're live again. Let's see. Where's my notes? Ah, there's my notes. There we go. Healy. Okay, let's see here. Gonna wait a little bit until people have joined. Oops. So, apologize for the bad mic quality. I wish some of my viewers could have told me that my mic was bad, because it was crap. But then again, it's my obligation, of course, to check my quality. But it was good in the beginning, which was weird. Oh well, mistakes were made and I will learn. So now we're just gonna wait a little bit and see if anyone wanna join. Ate some delicious food with spinach and hamburger and a little bit of bacon, but I should probably have eaten the bacon last, because once I have eaten the bacon, the hamburger perhaps tasted so bland. I think it's because the bacon was so salty. And let's see, hopefully this is not too loud. Gonna move my footrest a little bit. Hey. Oi. There we go. No, look at my doggo's all waiting. Oh, pardon. Wait, if my quality was bad last stream, that means probably nobody heard a burp earlier. Okay, well, we have someone that's watching. Might as well start and then welcome in person. Okay, let's see. We ended on chapter 2. Hopefully it's gonna go a little bit fast. Maybe we can even read 3 chapters today. We shall see. Okay, let's see here. Blasted crow in my throat. Let's see here. Chapter 3. Jonathan Harker's journal continued. When I found that I was a prisoner of sort of wild feeling came over me. I rushed up and down the stairs, trying every door and peering out every window I could find, but after a little, the conviction of my helplessness overpowered all other feelings. When I looked back, after a few hours, I think I must have been mad for the time, for I behaved much as a rat does in a trap. When, however, the conviction had come to me that I was helpless, I sat down quietly as I have ever done anything in my life, and began to think over what was best to be done. I was thinking still, as yet have come to no definitive conclusion. Of one thing only I am certain, that it's no use of making my ideas known to the Count. He knows well that I am imprisoned, and as he has done himself, and has doubtless his own motives for it. He would only deceive me if I trusted him fully with the facts. So far as I can see, my only plan will be to keep my knowledge and fears to myself, and my eyes opened. I am, I know, either being deceived, like a baby, by my own fears, or else I am in desperate straits. And if the latter be so, I need and shall need all my brains to get through. I had hardly come to this conclusion when I heard the great door below shut, and I knew the Count had returned. He did not come at once into the library, so I went cautiously to my own room and found him making the bed. This was odd, but only confirmed that I had all along, though, that there are no servant in the house. When later I saw him through the shrinks of the hinges of the door, laying the table in the dining room, I was assured of it, for if he does himself or the manual officers, surely it is proof that there is no one else in the castle. This must have been the Count himself who was driven off the coast and brought me here. This is a terrible thought, for if so, what does it mean that he could control the wolves as he did by only holding up his hand? For silence. How was it that all people of Bristras and the one on the couch had some terrible fear of me? Was it meant to be giving was meant the giving of the crucifix of the garlic and the wild rose of the mountain ash? Bless that good woman who hung the crucifix around my neck, for it is a comfort and a strength to me whenever I touch it. It is odd that a thing which I have been taught to regard with disfavor and as idolatrous should in a time of loneliness and trouble be of help. Is it that there is something in the essence of this thing itself, or that it is a medium, a tangible help in conveying memory of sympathy or comfort? Some time, if it may be, I must examine this matter and try to make up my mind about it. In the meantime, I must find out all I can about Count Dracula, as it may help me to understand. Tonight he may talk of himself if I turn the conversation that way. I must be very careful, however, not to wake his suspicion. Midnight. I have had a long talk with the Count. I asked him a few questions on Transylvania history, and he warmed up to the subject wonderfully. In his speaking of things and people, and especially of battles, he spoke as if he had been present at them all. This he afterwards explained by saying that to a boyar the pride of his house and name is his own pride, that their glory is his glory, that their fate is his fate. Whenever he spoke of his house, he always said we, and spoke almost in a plural, like a king speaking. I wish I could put down all he said exactly as he said it. For me, it was most fascinating. It seems to have in it a whole story, a history of the country. Pardon? He grew excited as he spoke and walked about the room, pulling his great white mustache and grasping anything on which he laid his hands, as though he would crush it by strength. One thing he said, which I shall put down as nearly as I can, for it tells in a way the story of his race. Let's see how I pronounce this. We Shikailas have a right to be proud, for in our veins flows the blood of many brave races who fought as the lion fighters for lordship. Here in the whirlpool of Europe's races, the Ugric tribe bore down from Iceland the fighting spirit which Thor and Woden gave them, which their berserkers displayed to such fell intents on the seaboards of Europe, and of Asia and Africa too, till the people thought that the werewolves themselves had come. Here too, when they came, they fought the Huns, whose warlike fury had swept the earth like a living flame, till the dying people held that in their veins ran the blood of those old witches who expelled from Siphina, oh my god, butchering. Sophia had mated with the devil in the desert. Fools, fools. What devil or what witch was ever so great as Attila, whose blood is in these veins? He held up his arms. This is a wonder that we were a conquering race, that we were proud, that when the Magyars, the Lombards and the Avars, the Bulgars or the Turks poured his thousands on our frontiers, we drove them back. Is it strange that when Arpad and his legions swept through the Hungarian fatherlands, he fought us here when he reached the frontier, that the Honfogelas was completely there, and when the Hungarians flood swept eastward and the Seklas were claimed as kindred by the victorious Magyars, and to us for centuries was trusted the guarding of the frontier of Turkey land. Aye, and more than that, I won't sick. Oh, Tama, did you trap yourself again? Ugh, my cat's doing weird stuff. Let's see here. Endless duties of the Frontierian Guard. As the Turks say, water sleeps, and the enemy is sleepless. Who more gladly than we throughout the 4 nations received the bloody sword, or at its warlike call flocked quicker to the standard of the kings? When was redeemed that great shame of my nation, the shame of Kasova, when the flags of the Walash and the Magyar went down beneath the crescent? Who was it but one of my own race, who as voivode crossed the Downby and beat the Turk on his own ground? It was a Dracula indeed. Woe was it that his own unworthy brother, when he had fallen, sold his people to the Turk and brought the shame of slavery on them. Was it not this Dracula, indeed, who inspired that others of his race, who in later age again and again brought his foe over the great river into the Turkey land, who, when he was beaten back, came again and again, though he had to come alone for the bloody field where his troops were being slaughtered, since he knew that he had alone could ultimately triumph. He said that he thought only of himself. Bah! What good are peasants without a leader? Where ends the war without a brain and heart to conduct it? Again, when? After the Battle of Mokas, we threw off the Hungarians' yoke. We of the Dracula blood were amongst their leaders. Our spirit would not broke, that we were not free. Ah, young sir. There's a class, and the Dracula, as their heart's blood, their brains, and their swords, can boost a record that mush, mushroom grows, like the Harproods and the Romanovs can never reach. The warlike days are over. Blood is too precious a thing in these days of dishonorable peace, and the glories of the great race are a tale that is told. It was by this time, close on morning, and we went to bed. Meh, this diary seems horrible, like the beginning of the Arabian Nights, where everything has to break off at cock's crow, or like the ghost of Hamlet's father. May 12th. Let me begin with facts, bare, murderous facts, verified by books and figures, and of which there can be no doubt. I must not confuse them with experience, which will have the rest of my own observation or my memory of them. Last evening, when the last evening when the Count came from his room, he began to ask me questions on legal matters and on the doing of certain kind of business. I had spent the day very wearily over books, and simply to keep my mind occupied, went over some of the matters I had been examining in Lincoln's Inn. There was a certain method in Count's enquiries, so I shall try to put them down in sequence. The knowledge may somehow or sometime be useful to me. First, he asked if a man in England might have 2 solicitors or more. I told him he might have a dozen if he wishes, but that it would not be wise to have more than one solicitor engaged in one transaction, as only one could act at a time, and to change would be certain to militate against his interests. He seemed thoughtfully to understand, and went to ask if there would be any practical difficulty in having one man to attend, say, to banking and another to look after shipping, in case local help were needed in a place far from home of the banking solicitor. I asked to explain more fully, so that I might not by any chance mislead him. So he said, I shall illustrate. Your friend and mine, Mr. Peter Hawkins, from under the shadow of your beautiful cathedral of Exeter, which is far from the London's buys for me through your goods self. My place at London good. Now, here let me say frankly, lest you should think it strange that I have sought the services of one so far off from London instead of someone resident in here, that my motive was that no local interest might be served save my wish only, and as one of London's residents might, perhaps, have some purpose of himself or friend to serve. I went thus afield to seek my agent. Those labours should be only to my interest. Now, suppose I, who have much of a fair wish to ship goods, say Newcastle or Durham, or Harwich or Dover? Might it not be that I should with more ease be done by co-signing to one of these ports? I answered that certainly it would be the most easy, but that we solicitors had a system of agents one for the other, so that the local work could be done locally on instruction from any solicitor, so that the client simply placing himself in the hands of one man could have his wishes carried out by him without further trouble. But, he said he, I could be at liberty to direct myself. Is it not so? Of course, I replied, and such is often done by men of business, who do not like the whole of their affair to be known by any one person. Good, he said, and then went to ask about the means of making co-signing and then forms to be gone through, and of all sorts of difficulties which might arise, but by or through could be guarded against. I explained these things to him to the best of my ability, and he certainly left me under the impression that he would have made a wonderful solicitor, for there was nothing that he did not think of or foresee. For a man who was never in the country, and who did not evidently do much in the way of business, his knowledge and acumen was wonderful. When he had satisfied himself to these points of which he had spoken, I had verified all as well as I could by the books available. He suddenly stood up and said, Have you written since your first letter to our friend Mr. Peter Hawkins, or any others? It was with some bitterness in my heart that I answered that I had not. That it has yet I had not seen any opportunities of sending letters to anybody. Then write now, my young friend, he said, laying a heavy hand on my shoulder. Write to our friend and to any other and say, if it will please you, that you shall stay with me until a month from now. Do you wish me to stay so long? I asked, for my heart grew cold at the thought. For a moment. Need to take a sip. I desire it much, nay, I will take no refusal. When your master, employer, what you will, engaged that someone should come on his behalf, it was understood that my needs only were to be consulted. I have no stinged. It is not so. What should I do but bow acceptance? It was Mr. Hawkins' interest, not mine, and I had to think of him, not myself. And besides, while Count Dracula was speaking, there was that in his eyes and in his bearing which made me remember that I was a prisoner, and that if I wished it, I could have no choice. The Count saw his victory in my bow, and his master in the trouble of my face, where he began at once to use them, but in his own smooth, resistless way. I pray you, my good young friend, that you will not discourage of things other than business in your letters. It will doubtless please your friends to know that you are well, and that you look forward to getting home to them. Is it not so? As he spoke, he handed me 3 sheets of noted paper and 3 envelopes. They were all of the thinnest. They were all of the thinnest foreign post, and looking at them, then at him, and noticed his quiet smile with a sharp canine teeth lying over the red underlip, I understood as well as if he had spoken that I should be more careful what I wrote, for he would be able to read it. So I determined to write only formal notes now, but to write fully to Mrs. Hawkins in secret, and also to Mina, for to her I could write shorthand, which would puzzle the Count. If he did see it, then I had written my 2 letters. I sat quietly, reading a book, whilst the Count wrote several notes, referring as he wrote them to some books on his table. Then he took up my 2 and placed them with his own and put them by his writing materials, after which, the instant the door had closed behind him, I leaned over and looked at the letters, which were facing down on the table. I felt no compunction in doing so, for under the circumstances I feel that I should protect myself in every way I could. One of the letters was directed to Samuel F. Billington, number 7, the Crescent, Whitby, another to Earl of Thurn, Warna. The third was to Coates and CEO London, and the fourth to Hearn Klopstock and Bilworth bankers, Budapest. The second and fourth were unsealed. I was just about to look at them when I saw the door handle move, sank back in my seat, having just had time to resume my book before the Count, holding still another letter in his hand. Entering the room, he took up the letters on the table and stamped them carefully, and then turning to me and said, I trust that you will forgive me, but I will have much work to do in private this evening. You will, I hope, find all things as you wish. At the door he turned, and after a moment's pause he said, Let me advise you, my dear young friend, nay, let me warn you with all seriousness, that should you leave this room, you will not by any chance go to sleep in any other parts of the castle. It is old, and has many memories, and there are bad dreams for those who sleep unwisely. Be warned. Should sleep now or ever overcome you, or be like to do, then haste to your own chamber or to these rooms, for your rest will then be safe. But if you be not careful in this respect, then he finished his speech in a gruesome way, for he motioned with his hand as if he was washing them. I quite understood. My only doubt was to whenever any dream could be more terrible than the unnatural, horrible net of gloom and mystery which seemed to closing in around me. Later, I endorsed the last words written. By this time there is no doubt in question. I shall not fear to sleep in any place. I shall not fear to sleep in any place where he is not. I have placed the crucifix overhead of my bed. I imagine that my rest is thus free from dreams, and there it shall remain. When he left me, I went to my room. After a little while, not hearing any sound, I came out and went up the stone stairs to where I could look out towards the south. There was some sense of freedom in the vast expanse, inaccessible, accessible through though it was to me. As compared to the narrow darkness of the courtyard, looking out on this, I felt that I was indeed in prison, and it seemed to want a breath of fresh air, though it were of the night. I'm beginning to feel this nocturnal existence tell on me. It is destroying my nerve. I start, I start at my own shadow, and I'm full of all sorts of horrible imagines. God knows that there is ground for my terrible fear in this accursed place. I look out over the beautiful expanse, bathed in soft yellow moonlight, till it was almost as light as day. In the soft light, the distant hills began to melt, became melted, and the shadows in the valley and gorse of velvety blackness, the mere beauty seemed to cheer me. There was peace and comfort in every breath I drew. As I leaned from the window, my eyes was caught by something moving, a story below me, and somewhat to my left, where I imagined from the order of the rooms that the window of the Count's own room would look out. The window at which I stood was tall and deep-stoned mullioned, and though weather-worn was still complete, as it was evidently many a day since the case had been there. I drew back behind the stonework and looked carefully out. What I saw was the Count's head coming out of the window. I did not see the face, but I knew the man from the neck and the movement of his back and arms. In any case, I could not mistake the hands which I had so many opportunities of study. I was at first interested and somewhat amused, for it is wonderful how small a matter will interest and amuse a man when he is a prisoner. But my very feelings changed to repulsion and terror when I saw the whole man slowly emerge from the window and began to crawl down the castle wall over the dreadful abyss, face down, with his cloak spreading out around him like great wings. At first I could not believe my eyes. I thought that was some trick of the moonlight, some weird effect of the shadow. But I kept looking, and I could not be delusion. I saw the fingers and toes grasp the corner of the stone, worn clearly of the mortar by the stress of years, and by thus using every projection and inequality move downwards with considerable speed, just as a lizard move along the wall. That's not creepy at all. It's wonderful reading this sort of shit when it's like dark outside too. What manner of a man is this? Or what manner of creature is it in the sublance of man? I feel the dread of this horrible place overpowering me. I am in fear, in awful fear, and there is no escape for me. I am encompassed about with terror, and I dare not think of it. May 15. Once more I have seen the Count go out in his lizard fashion. Okay, side note I just have to mention. In his lizard fashion sounds less scary. He moved downwards in sidelong way, some 100 feet down, and a good deal to the left. It vanished into some hole or window. When his head had disappeared, I leaned out to try to see more, but without avail. The distance was too great to allow a proper angle of sight. I knew he had left the castle now, and thought to use the opportunity to explore more than I had dared to say yet. Than I had dared to do yet, not say. Oh my god. There we go. Pretty. Okay, let's see here. I went back to the room and taking a lamp tried all doors. They were all locked as I had expected, and the locks were comparably new. But I went down the stone stair and the hall where I had entered originally. I found I could pull back the bolt easily enough and unhook the great chains, but the door was locked and the key was gone. The key must be in the Count's room. I must watch should his door be unlocked, so that I may get it and escape. I went on to make a thorough examination of the various stairs and passages, and to try the doors that opened from them. One or two small rooms near the hall were open, but there were nothing to see in them except old furniture, dusted with age and moth-eaten. At last, however, I found one door at the top of the stairway, which, though it seemed locked, gave a little under pressure. I tried it harder and found that it was not really locked, but that the resistance came from the fact that the hinges had fallen somewhat, and the heavy door rested on the floor. Here was an opportunity which I might not have again, so I exerted myself, and with many effort forced it back so that I could enter. I was now in a wing of the castle, further to the right than the room I knew, and a stowaway lower down. From the window I could see the suite of rooms lay along to the south of the castle. The window of the end room looking out both west and south, one on the latter side as well as to the former. There was a great precipice. The castle was built on the corner of a great rock, so that on the three sides it was quite impregnable. Basically, you can't attack it very easily. And great windows were placed here, where slings or bows or culverins could not reach, and consequently light and comfort impossible to a position which had to be guarded were secured. To the west was a great valley, and then rising far away great jagged mountain fastness, rising peak on peak, the sheer rock studded with mountain ash and thorn, whose roots clung in cracks and crevices and crannies of the stones. This was evidently the portion of the castle unoccupied. Uh, oh, occupied by the ladies in bygone days, for the furniture had more an air of comfort than any I had seen. The windows were curtainless, and the yellow moonlight flooded in through the diamond panes, enable one to see even colors, whilst it softened the wealth of dust which laid over all the disguised in some measure the ravage of time and moth. Time and moth. Cute. My lamp seemed to be of little effect in the brilliant moonlight, but I was glad to have it with me, for there was a dread loneliness in the place which chilled my heart and made my nerves tremble. Still, it was better than living alone in a room which I had come to hate from the presence of the Count, and after trying a little to school my nerves, I found a soft quietude come over me. Here I am, sitting at a little oak table where in old times possibly some fair lady sat to pen, with much thought and many blushes, her ill-spelt love letter, and written in my diary in shorthand all that has happened since I closed it last. It is the 19th century, up to date with a vengeance, and yet, unless my senses deceive me, the old century had have power of its own, which mere modernity cannot kill. I probably butchered that word, but alas, so poety. Okay, let's see here. Later, the morning of May 16, God preserve my sanity. For this I am reduced. Safety and the assurance of safety are things of the past. Whilst I live on here, there is but one thing to hope for, and that I may not go mad, if indeed I be not mad already. If I be sane, then surely it is maddening to think that of all the foul things that lurk in this hateful place, the Count is the least dreadful to me, that to him alone I can look for safety, even though this be only whilst I can serve his purpose. Great God, merciful God, let me be calm, for out of that ways lies madness indeed. I begin to get new lights on certain things which have puzzled me. Up to now I never quite knew what Shakespeare meant when he made Hamlet say, my tablets, quick my tablets, this met that I put it down, etc. For now, feeling as though my own brain were unhinged, as if the shock had come with much end in its undoing. I turned to my diary for repost, The habit of entering accurately must help to soothe me. The Count's mysterious warning frightened me at the time. It frightened me more not when I think of it, for in the future he has a fearful hold upon me. I shall fear no doubt what he may say. When I had written in my diary and had fortunately replaced the book and the pen in my pocket, I felt sleepy. The Count's warning came into my mind, but I took pleasure in disobeying it. The sense of sleep was upon me, and with it the obstination which sleep brings as outsider. The soft moonlight soothed, and the wide expanse without gave a sense of freedom which refreshed me. I determined not to return tonight to the gloom-haunted room, but to sleep here, where of old ladies had sat and sung and lived sweet lives, while their gentle breasts were sad for their menfolk away in the midst of remorseless wars. I drew a great couch out of its place near the corner so that I may lay. I could look at the lovely view to the east-south and unthink of uncaring for the dust. Composed myself for sleep. Me? My second hotbar? Why? Eh? I'm confused. You mean in Minecraft? Oh yeah, the dragon staff, yeah. It's a command staff. One sec, let's do it like this. See, dragon staff gone. Yeah. Technically I didn't kill any dragons, they were wyverns, but yeah. Also, hi Sheila. Do you enjoy the book so far? And yes, my audio is way better because none of you fluffballs told me that my mic was bad. But oh well. Ugh. I'm glad you enjoy it. I just hope it's not going to be too scary for me because this is technically a horror novel. So, and me having vivid imagination and it's dark all around me right now, other than my light, and it's dark outside. So yeah. But as long as I don't invite a vampire in, I should be okay. Besides, I have actually garlic in the kitchen, so I'm safe. And I have concentrated garlic too. Unless it's a hot vampire, but then again, nah. Anyhow, let's continue. Yeah. I wonder if Seraph would be a good vampire. Nah, he wouldn't be able to rock the goth aesthetic. Let's see here, where was I? Let's see. Something boobs, something couch. Let's see. And unthinking of the uncaring of the dust, composed myself for sleep. I suppose I must have fallen asleep. I hope so. But I fear, for all that followed was startlingly real. So real that now sitting here in the broad, full sunshine of the morning, I cannot in the least believe that it was all sleep. I was not alone. The room was the same, unchanged in any way since I came to it. I could see along the floor, in the brilliant moonlight, my own footsteps marked where I had disturbed the long accumulator of dust. In the moonlight opposite of me, three young women, ladies, by their dress and manners. I thought at the time that I must dream when I saw them. They threw no shadow on the floor. They came close to me and looked at me for some time, and then whispered together. Two were dark and had high aquiline noses, like the Count, and great dark piercing eyes that seemed to be almost red when contrasted with the pale yellow moon. The the other was fair as can be, with great masses of golden hair and eyes like pale sapphire. It seemed to know somehow to I seemed to somehow know her face, and to know it in connection with any dreamy fear, but I could not recollect at any moment how or where. All three had brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls against the ruby of their voluptuous lips. There was something about them that made me uneasy, some longing, and at the same time some deadly fear. I felt in my heart a wicked burning desire that they could kiss me with those red lips. It is not good to note this down. At least some days it should meet Mina's eyes and cause her pain, but it is the truth. They whispered together and they all three laughed. Such a silvery, musical laugh, but as hard as though the sound never could have come through the softness of human lips. It was like the intolerable, tingling sweetness of water glasses when played on by a what I seriously hope you guys didn't hear that. It was some guys rolling by with a car with music. When played on by a cunning hand. The fair girl shook her head. How the fluff do you say that word? Courteously. And the other two urged her on. One said, "Go on, you are first. We shall follow. Yours is the right to begin." The other one added, "He is young and strong. There are kisses for us all." I guess they mean smooch of death. I lay quietly, looked up from under my eyelashes in an agony of delightful anticipation. The fair girl advanced and bent over me till I could feel the movement of her breath upon me. Sweet it was in one sense, honey sweet, and sent the same tingle through the nerves as her voice, but with a bitter underlying the sweet of bitter offensiveness, as one smells in blood. I was afraid to raise my eyelids, but looked out and saw perfectly under the lashes The girl went on her knees and bent over me, simply gloating and gloating. There was a deliberate voluptuousness which was both thrilling and repulsing, and as she arched her neck, she actually licked her lips like an animal, till I could see in the moonlight the moisture shining on their scarlet lips and on their red tongue as it lapped the white sharp teeth. Lower and lower went her head as the lips went below the range of my mouth and chin and seemed to fasten on my throat. Then she paused, and I could hear the churning sound of her tongue as it licked her teeth and lips, and I could feel the hot breath on my neck. Then the skin of my throat began to tingle, as one's flesh does when the hand that it is to tickle it approaches nearer. I could feel the soft shivering touch of lips on the super sensitive skin of my throat, and the hard dance of two sharp teeth just touching and pausing there. I closed my eyes in languorous ecstasy and waited with a beating heart. But at that instant, another sensation swept through me as quick as lightning. I was cautious of the presence of the Count and of his being as if lapped in a storm of fury. As my eyes opened involuntarily, I saw his strong hand and grasped the slender neck of the fair woman, and with giant's power draw it back. The blue eye transformed with fury, the white teeth champing with rage, and the fair cheeks blazed red with passion. But the Count, never did I imagine such wrath and fury. Even to the demons of the pit, eyes were positively blazing, the red light in them were lurid, as if the flames of hell fire blazed behind them. His face was deadly pale, and the lines of it were hard like drawn wires. The thick eyebrows that met over the nose now seemed like a heaving bar of white hot metal. With a fierce sweep of his arm, he hurled the woman from him, and the motion of the others as though he were beating them back. It was the same imperious gesture that I had seen used to the wolves. In a voice which, though low and almost in a whisper, seemed to cut through the air and ring in the room, he said, "How dare you touch him, any of you? How dare you cast eyes on him when I had forbidden it? Back, I tell you all. This man belongs to me. Beware how you meddle with him, or you will have to deal with me." The fair girl, with a laugh of ribald conquerity, turned to answer, "You yourself never loved. You never love." On this the other women joined, and such mirthless, hard, soulless laughter rang through the room, and I almost made me faint to hear. It seemed like a pleasure of fiends. Let's see here. Are we to have nothing tonight? Said one of them with a low laugh, and she pointed to the bag which they had thrown upon the floor, and which moved as though there were some living thing within it. As for answer, he nodded his head. One of the women jumped forward and opened it. If my eyes did not deceive me, there were a gasp and a low wail, as of a half-smothered child. The woman closed around, while I was aghast with horror, but as I looked, they disappeared, and with them the dreadful bag. There was no door near them, and they could not have passed me without me noticing. They simply seemed to fade into the rays of the moonlight and pass through the window. Wow, it literally takes me an hour to read a chapter, dang. I hope I read faster this time. For I could see outside the dim shadowy forms for a moment before they entirely faded away. Then the horrors overcame me, and I sank down unconscious. And now I'm gonna read chapter 4, you guys. Just gonna take a sip first. I awoke in my own bed. If it been that I had not dreamed, the Count must have carried me here. I tried to satisfy myself on the subject, but could not arrive at any unquestionable result. To be sure, there were certainly small evidence, such as my clothes were folded and laid by in a manner which was not my habit. My watch was still unwound, and I am rigorously accustomed to wind it in the last thing before going to bed. And many such details, but these things are no proof, or they may have been evidence that my mind was not as unusual. And for some cause or another, I had certainly been much upset. I must watch for proof. Of one thing I am glad. If it was that the Count carried me here and undressed me, he must have been hurried in his task, for my pockets are intact. I am sure this diary would have been a mystery to him which he would not have brooked. He would have taken or destroyed it. As I look around this room, although it has been to me full of fear, it is now a sort of sanctuary, for nothing can be more dreadful than those awful women who were or who are waiting to suck my blood. Damn, they gotta suck. May 18th. I have been down to look at the room again in daylight, for I must know the truth. When I got to the doorway at the top of the stairs, I found it closed. It had been forcefully driven against the jab, that the part of the woodwork was splintered. I could see the bolt of the lock had not been shot, but the door is fastened from the inside. I fear, I fear it was no dream, and must act on this surmise. Can people stop driving by? Oh my god, can people stop driving by with loud music? Oh my goodness. May 19th. I'm surely in the toils. Last night, the Count asked me in the severest tone to write 3 letters, one saying that my work here is nearly done. Hmm. And that I should start for home within a few days. Another that I was starting on the next morning from the time of the letter, and the third that I had left the castle and arrived at Brisbane. I would fain have rebelled, but felt like in the present state of things it would be madness to quarrel openly with the Count, while I am so absolutely in his power, and to refuse would be to excite his superstition and to arouse his anger. He knows that I know too much, and that I must not live, lest it be dangerous to him. My only chance is to prolong my opportunities. Something may occur which will give me a chance to escape. I saw in his eyes something of the gathering wrath which was manifest when he hurled that fair woman from him. He explained to me that posts were few and uncertain, and that my writing would ensure ease of mind to my friends. And he assured me with so much impressive that he would countermand the later letters, which would be held over pretense until due time, in case change would prolonged my stay. That that to oppose him would have been to create new suspicion, and therefore pretended to fall in with his views and asked him what date I should put on the letters. He calculated for me and said first should be the 12th, June 12th, second, June 19th, and the third, June 29th. I now know the span of my life. God help me. Wait, this was the 19th of May. Oh, damn, they're skipping a one. 28th of May. There is a chance of escape, or at any rate of being able to send word home. A band of Schwein have come to the castle and are encamped in the courtyard. These are gypsies. I have noted of them in my book. They are peculiar in these parts of the world, although allied to the ordinary gypsies all the world over. There are thousands of them in Hungary and Transylvania, who are almost outside all law. They attach themselves as a rule to some great noble or boyard, and call themselves by his name. They are fearless and without religion, save superstition, and they talk only their own very, 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 blah, 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 variant of the Romany thong. Thong? Thong? I'm sorry, guys. and and their own variant of the Roman tongue. Not thong. I shall write some letters home and shall try to get them to have them posted. I have already spoken to them, though, through my window to begin acquaintanceship. They took their hats off and made obscenity and many signs, which, however, oh wait, I need to do that. There, my bad, guys. Now it's cozy again. Okay. They took off their hats in obscenity and many signs, which, however, I could not understand any more than I could their spoken language. I have written the letters. Minos is in shorthand, and I simply asked Mr. Hawkins to communicate with her. To her, I have explained. To her, I have explained my situation, but without the horrors, which I may only summarize. It would shock and frighten her. It would shock and frighten her to death, were I to expose my heart to her. Should the letters not carry, then the Count shall not yet know my secret or extent of my knowledge. I had given the letters. I threw them through the bars of my window with a gold piece and made the sign I could have, what signs I could to have them posted. The man who took them pressed them to his heart and bowed, and then put them in his cap. I should do no more. I stole back the study and began to read. As the Count did not come in, I have written there. The Count has come. He sat down beside me and said in his smoothest voice as he opened two letters, "The Saganasa has given me these, of which, though I know not where they come, I shall, of course, take care. See, he must have looked at it. One is for you, and to my friend Peter Hawkins. The other," here he caught sight of the strange symbols as he opened the envelope, and a dark look came into his face as he gazed wickedly. "The other is a vile thing, an outrage upon friendship and hospitality. It is not signed. Well, so it cannot matter to us." And he calmly held the letter and envelope in the flame of the lamp till they were consumed. Then he went on, "The letter to Hawkins that I shall of course send on, since it's yours. Your letters are sacred to me. You pardon, my friend, that unknowingly I did break the seal. Will you not cover it again?" He held out the letter to me, and with a courtesy bow handed me a clean envelope. I could only redirect it and hand it to him in silence. When he went out of the room, I could hear the key turn. A minute later, I went over and tried it, and the door was locked. When, an hour or two after, the Count came quietly into the room, his coming awakened me, for I had gone to sleep on the sofa. He was very courteous and very cheery in his manner. On seeing that I had been sleeping, he said, "So, my friend, you're tired? Get to bed. There is the surest rest I may not have the pleasant oops. I may not have the pleasure of talking tonight, since there are many labors to me, but you will sleep, I pray." I passed to my room and went to bed, and, strange to say, slept without dreaming. Despair has its own calm. May 31. This morning when I woke up, I thought I would provide myself with some paper and envelopes from a bag and kept them in my pocket, so that I might write in case I should get some opportunity. But again, A surprise, again a shock. Every scrap of paper was gone, and with it all my notes, my memoranda relating to railways and travel, my letters of credit. In fact, all that might have been useful to me were in one to me were once outside the castle. I sat and pondered a while, and then some thoughts occurred to me, and I made search of my portmanteau and in the wardrobe where I had placed my clothes. The suit in which I had travelled was gone, and also my overcoat and rug. I could find no traces of them anywhere. This looked like some new scheme of villainous. Oh, it's skipping a whole month. June 17. This morning, as I was sitting on the edge of my bed, cudgeling my brains, I heard without a crackling of whips and pounding and scraping of horse feet up the rocky path beyond the courtyard. With joy, I hurried to the window and saw drive into the yard two great lithe wagons, each drawn by 8 sturdy horses, and at the head of each pair a Slovak, with his wide hat, great nailed stud belt, dirty sheepskin, and high boots. They had also their long staff in hand. I ran to the door, intending to descend and try to join them through the main hall. As I thought that the way might be open for them, again a shock. My door was fastened on the outside. Then I ran to the window and cried to them. They looked up at me stupidly and pointed, but just the hetman of the channel came out, and seeing them pointing at my window, said something at which they laughed. Henceforth, no effort of mine, no piteous cry or agony entry would make them even look at me. They resortedly turned away. The leaf wagon contained great square boxes with handle of thick rope. They were evidently empty by the ease of which the Slovak handled them, and by their resound as they were roughly moved. When they were all unloaded and packed in great heaps, with one corner of the yard, the Slovaks were given some money by the shrugs, and spitting on it for luck, lazily went each to his horse's head. Shortly afterward, I heard the crackling of their whips die away in the distance. June 24th. Last night the Count left me early and locked himself into his own room. As soon as I dared, I ran up to the winding stair and looked out the window, which opened south. I thought I could watch for the Count, for there is something going on. The Shnagani are quartered somewhere in the castle, and are doing work of some kind. I know of it, for now and then I hear a faraway muffled sound as of matchstock and spade. And whatever it is, it must have been the end of some sort of ruthless villainy. I had been at the window somewhat less than half an hour when I saw something coming out of Count's window. I drew back and watched carefully as saw the whole man emerge. It was a new shock to me to find that he had held on to the suit of clothes which I had worn while I was travelling here, and slung over his shoulder the terrible bag which I had seen the woman take away. There could be no doubt about his quest, it and in my garb too. This then is his new scheme of evil, that he will allow others to see me as they think, so that he may both leave evidence and I have been seen in the Tower Village posting my own letters, and that any wickedness which he may do shall by the local people be attuned to me. It makes me rage to think that this can go on, and while I am shut up here in a veritable prison, but without that protection of the law which is ever a criminal right and consolation. Oh, hello, cat. Mm. Okay, let's see here. I thought I would watch for the Count's return, and for a long time sat doggedly at the window. Then I began to notice that there were some querent little specks floating in the rays of the moonlight. They were little, like the tiniest grain of dust, and they swirled around and gathered in clusters in the nebulous sort of way. I watched them with a sense of soothing, and a sort of calm stole over me. I leaned back in the embrasure in a more comfortable position so that I could enjoy more fully the ethereal gamboling. Something made me start up, a low, piteous howling of dogs somewhere, far below in the valley, which was hidden from my sight. Louder it seems to ring in my ears, and the floating motes of dust to take a new shape to the sound as they danced in the moonlight. I felt myself struggling to awake to some call of my instinct. Nay, my very soul was struggling, and my half remembered sensibility were striving to answer the call. I was becoming hypnotized. Quicker and quicker danced the dust. The moonbeams seemed to quicker as they went by me in the mass of gloom beyond. More and more they gathered, till they seemed to take dim phantom shapes, and then I started broad awake and in full possession of my senses, and ran screaming from the place. The phantom shapes, which were becoming gradually materialized from the moonbeams, were those three ghostly women of whom I was doomed. I flee and felt somewhat safer in my own room, where there was no moonlight and where the lamp was burning brightly. When a couple of hours had passed, I heard something stirring in the Count's room, something like sharp wail quickly suppressed, and then there was silent, deep, awful silence, which chilled me. With a beating heart, I tried the door, but I was locked in my prison and could do nothing. I sat down and simply cried. As I sat, I heard a sound in the courtyard without the agonizing cry of a woman. Courtyard without the agonizing cry of a woman. I rushed to the window and threw it up, peering between the bars. There, indeed, was a woman with dishevelled hair, holding her hands over her heart as one distressed with running. She was leaning against the corner of the gateway. When she saw my face at the window, she threw herself forward and shouted in a voice laden with menace, "Monster, give me my child." She threw herself on her knees and raised up her hands, cried at the same time. The same words in tones which wrung my heart. Then she tore her hair and beat her breast and abandoned herself to all the violence of extravagant emotion. Finally, she threw herself forward, and though I could not see her, I could hear the beating of her naked hands against the door. Somewhere high overhead, probably on the tower, I hear the voice of the Count calling in his harsh, metallic whisper. His call seemed to be answered from far and wide by the howling wolves. Before many minutes had passed, a pack of them poured like a pent-up dam when liberated throughout the wide entrance into the courtyard. There was no cry from the woman, and the howling of the wolves was but short. Before long they streamed away, singly licking their lips. I could not pity her, for I knew now what had become of her child, and she was better dead. What shall I do? What can I do? How can I escape from this dreadful thing of night, gloom, and fear? June 25th. No man knows till he suffer from the night how sweet and dear to his heart and eye the morning can be. When the sun so grew so high this morning that it struck the top of the great gateway opposite to my window, the high spot which it touched seemed to me as if the dove. Mm. Hello, actual. Oh yeah, I'm reading a story for everybody. It's Dracula, if you ever heard about that one. Yeah. The only downside is there's so many old pronunciations that I'm kind of like, stumbling a bit. My goal is to finish. Okay, yeah. Take care. But yeah, my goal is to finish chapter 4 before I sleep. Okay, let's see. Let's continue. If the dove from the ark had litten there, my fear fell from me as if I had been a vaporized garment which dissolved in the warmth. Take care, Axel. I must have I must take action of some sort whilst the courage of the day is upon me. Last night one of my post-dated letters went to post. The first one of fatal series, which is to blot out the very traces of my existence on earth. Let me think of it. Action. It has always been at night time that I have been molested or threatened, or in some way in danger or in fear. I have not yet seen the Count in the daylight. Can it be that he sleeps when others awake? That he may be awake while they sleep? If I could only get into his room, but there is no possible way. The door is always locked. No way for me. Yes, there is a way, if one dare to take it. Where is his body has gone, and why may not another body go? I have seen him myself crawling from his window. Why should not I imitate him? and go in by his window. The chances are desperate, may my need, but my need is more desperate still. I shall risk it. At the worst, it can only be death, and a man's death is not a calf's. And the dreaded hereafter may still be open to me. God help me in my task. Goodbye, Mina. If I fail, goodbye. My faithful friend and second father, goodbye. May all that lasts of all, wait, goodbye all, and last of all, Mina. Same day later. I have made the effort, God helping me. I have come safely back to this room. I must put down every detail in order. I went, whilst my courage was fresh straight to the window on the south side, and at once got outside on this side. The stones are big and roundly cut and roughly cut, and the mortar had been proceeded with process of time been washed away between them. I took off my boots and ventured out on on the desperate way. I looked down once, so to make sure that a sudden glimpse of an awful death would not overcome me, but after that kept my eyes away from it. I know pretty well the direction of the Count's window. And made it for it as well as I could, having regard to the opportunities available. I did not feel dizzy. I suppose I was too excited, and the time seemed ridiculously short till I found myself standing on the window sill and trying to raise up the sash. I was filled with agitation, however, when I bent down and slid feet foremost in through the window. Then I looked around for the Count, but with surprising gladness made a discovery. The room was empty. It was barely furnished with other things. Seems as to have been never been used. The furniture was somehow the same style as the south room and was covered with dust. I looked for a key, but it was not in the lock and I could not find it anywhere. The only thing I found was a great heap of gold in one corner. Gold of all kind. Roman and British, Austrian and Hungarian, and Greek and Turkish money, covered with a film of dust as though it had lain long in the ground. None of it that I noticed was less than 300 years old. There were some. There were also chains and ornaments, some jewelry, but all of them old and stained. At the corner of the room was a heavy door. I tried for it, since I could not find the key of the room or a key to the outer room, which was the main object of my search. I must make further examination, or all my effort would be in vain. It was open, and it led through the stone passage to a circular stairway which went steeply down. Oh my god, cats move. Thank you. I descended, minding carefully where I went, for the stairs were dark, being only lit by loopholes in the heavy masonry. At the bottom they were dark tunnel-like passage, though which came a deadly sickly odor, the odor of old earth newly turned, as if as I went through the pathway, the smell grew closer and heavier. At last I pulled open a heavy door which stood ajar and found myself in an old ruined chapel, which had evidently been used as a graveyard. Oh my god, the music just started. That scared the shit out of me. The roof was broken, and in two places were steps leading to vaults, but the ground had directly been dug over, and the earth placed in great wooden boxes, manifestly those which had been brought by the Slovaks. There was nobody about, and I made a search over every inch of the ground so that not to lose a chance. I went down even in the vaults where the dim light struggled, although to do so was a dread to my very soul. Into two of them I went, but saw nothing except fragments of old coffins and piles of dust. In the third, however, I made a discovery. There, in one of the great boxes, of which there were 50 in all, one a pile of newly dug earth laid the Count. He was neither dead or asleep. I could not say. Which for eyes were open and stony, but without the glassiness of death, and the cheeks had the warmth of light, though all their pallor. The lips were as red as ever, but there was no sign of movement, no pulse, no breath, no beating of the heart. I bent over him and tried to find any sign of life, but in vain. He could not have laid there long, for the earthy smell would have passed away in a few hours. By the side of the box was its cover, pierced with holes here and there. I thought he might have the key on him, but when I went to search I saw the dead eyes, and in them dead through they were. Such a look of hate, though unconscious of me or my presence, that I fled from the place, and leaving the Count's room by the window, crawled again up the castle wall. Regaining my room, I threw myself panting upon the bed and tried to think. Wait, he searched the body but was scared? Okay. June 29th. Today is the date of my last letter, and the Count has taken steps to prove that it was genuine. For again I saw him leave the castle by the same window, and in my clothes, as he went down the wall lizard fashion. I wished I had a gun or some lethal weapon that I might destroy him, but I feared that no weapon wronged along by man's hand would have any effect on him. I dared not wait to see him return, for I fear to see those weird sisters. I came back to the library and read there until I fell asleep. I was awakened by the Count, who looked at me as grimly as a man could look at. He said, "Tomorrow, my friend, we must part. You return to your beautiful England, and I to some work which may have such an end that we may never meet. Your letter home has been dispatched Tomorrow I shall not be here, but I shall be ready for your journey. In the morning comes the Shagan, who have some labors of their own here, and also some come Slovak. When they have gone, my carriage shall come for you, and shall bear you to the Borgon Pass to meet the diligence of the Bugovian to Bissis. But I am in hopes that I shall see more of you at Castle Dracula. I suspected him, and determined to test his sincerity. Sincerity. It seems like a profanation of the word to write it in connection with such a monster, so I asked him point blank, "Why may I not go tonight?" "Because, dear sir, my coachman and horses are away on a mission. But I would walk, but I would walk with pleasure. I want to get away at once." He smiled, such a soft, smooth, diabolical smile, and I knew there was some trick behind his smoothness, and he said, "And your baggage?" "I do not care about it. I can send for it some other time." The Count stood up and said with a sweet courtesy which made me rub my eyes. It seemed so real. "You English have a saying which is close to my heart, for its spirit is what which rule our boyars. Welcome the coming, speed departing guest. Come with me, my dear young friend. Not an hour shall you wait in my house against your will. Though sad I am at your going, and that you so suddenly desire it come." With stately gravity, he with the lamp preceded to me down the stairs along the hall, suddenly stopped. "Hark!" Close at hand came the howling of many wolves. It was almost as if the sound sprang up the rising of his hand, just as the music of the great orchestra seemed to be leaping under the baton of the conductor. After a pause of the moment, he proceeded, in his steady way, to the door, drew back the precious bolts, unhooked the heavy change, and began to draw it open. To my intense astonishment, I saw that it was unlocked. Suspiciously, I looked around, but could see no key of any kind. As the door began to open, the howling of the wolves without grew louder and angrier. Their red jaws with chapping teeth and their blunt clawed feet as they leaped came in through the open door. I knew, uh, then that to struggle at the moment against the Count was useless. With such allies as these at his command, I could do nothing. But still the door continued slowly to open, and only the Count's body stood in the gap. Suddenly it struck me that this might be the moment and meaning to my doom. I was to be given to the wolves, and at my own instinctions. That was a There was a diabolical wickedness in the idea great enough for the Count. And at last chance I cried out, "Shut the door! I shall wait till the morning." And I covered my face with my hand, hiding my tears of bitter disappointment. With one sweep of his powerful arm, the Count threw the door shut, and the great ball glanced and echoed through the halls as they shot back in their places. In silence, we returned to the library, and after a minute or two, I went to my own room. The last I saw of Count Dracula was his kissing his hand to me, with a red light of triumph in his eyes, and with a smile that Judas in hell might be proud of. Goodness, savage. When I was in my room and about to lie down, I thought I heard a whispering at my door. I went up softly, so softly and listened, unless my ears deceived me. I heard the voice of Count Dracula. Back to your own place. Your time is not yet. Wait. Have patience. Tonight is mine. Tomorrow night is yours. There was a low, sweet ripple of laughter. And in rage I threw open the door and saw without the three terrible women licking their lips. As I appeared, they all jolted in horrible laughter and ran away. I came back to my room and threw myself on my knees. It is then so near the end. Tomorrow? Lord help me, and those whom I am dear. Goodness. June 30th. This may be the last word I ever written in this diary. I slept till just before dawn, and when I woke up, threw myself on my knees, for I determined that if death came, he should find me ready. At last I felt a subtle change in the air, and knew that the morning had come. Then came the welcome cockcrow, and I felt that I was safe. With a glad heart I opened the door and ran down the hall. I had seen that the door was unlocked, and now escape was before me. With hands that trembled with eagerness, I unhooked the chain and threw back the massive bolt, but the door would not move. Despair seized me. I pulled and pulled at the door and shook it, till, massive as it was, it rattled in its casement. I could see the bolt shut. It had been locked after I left the Count. Then a wild desire took me to obtain the key at any risk, and I determined then and there to scale the wall again and gain the Count's room. He might kill me, but death now seemed the happiest choice of evil. Without a pause, I rushed up the east window and scrambled down the hall and the wall. As before, into Count's room was empty, but that was as I expected. I could not see the key anywhere, but the heap of gold remained. I went through the door in the corner and down the winding stair and along the dark pathway of the old chapel. I knew now well enough where to find the monster I sought. The great box was in the same place, close against the wall, but the lid was laid on it, not fastened down, but with the nails ready in their place to be hammered home. I knew I must reach the body for the key. As I raised the lid and laid it against the back wall, and then I saw something which filled my very soul with horror. There laid the Count, but looking as if his youth had been half restored, for the white hair and mustache had changed to a dark irony grey. The cheeks were fuller, and the white skin seemed ruby red underneath. The mouth was redder than ever, for on the lips were gorges of fresh blood, which trickled from the corners of the mouth and ran down over the chin and neck. Even the deep burning eyes seemed to be almost swollen flesh, for the lids and pores underneath were bloated. It seemed as if the whole awful creature were simply gorged with blood. He lay like a filthy leech, exhausted with his replenish. I shuddered as I bent over to touch him, and every sense in me revolted the contact, but I had to search, or I was lost. The coming night see my own body banquet in a similar war of those horrid three. I felt all over the body, but no sign could I find the key. Then I stopped and looked at the Count. There was a mocking smile on the bloated face, which seemed to drive me mad. It was the being I was helping to transfer to London, where perhaps for centuries to come he might, amongst its teeming millions, sated his lust for blood and create a new and ever widening circle of semi-demons to patent on the helpless. The very thought drove me mad. A terrible desire came upon me. To rid the world of such monsters. There were no lethal weapons at hand, but I seized a shovel with the workmen had begun to fill the cases and lifted it high and struck it with the edge downwards at the hateful face. But as I did so, the head turned and the eyes fell upon mine. With all their blazing of basilisk horror, the sight seemed to paralyze me, and the shovel turned in my hand and glanced from the face, merely making a deep gash above the forehead. The shovel fell from my hand across the box, and as I pulled it away, the flang of the blade caught the edge of the lid, which fell over again. The hid the horrid thing from my sight. The last glimpse I had was of the bloated face, blood-stained and fixed with a grin of malice which could have held its own in nevermost hell. I thought and thought what would be my next move, but my brain seemed on fire, and I waited with a despairing feeling growing over me. As I waited, I heard in the distance a gypsy song sung by merry voices coming close, and though their song, the rolling of heavy wheels and cracking of whips. The Shang and Slovaks of who the Count had spoken were coming. With a last look around at the box which contained the vile body, I ran from the place and gained the Count's room, determined to rush out of the moment the door should be open. With strained ear I listened and heard downstairs the grinding of the key in the great lock and falling back of the heavy door. There must have been some sort of means of entry, or someone had a key for one of the locked doors. Then there came the sound of many feet tramping and dying away in some passage which set up the clanging echo. I turned to run down again towards the vault where I might find a new entrance, but at the moment there seemed to become a violent puff of wind, and the door of the winding stair blew to with a shock that set the dust of the liens flying. When I ran to push it open, I found that it was hopelessly fast. I was again prisoner, and the net of doom was closing around me more closely. As I'm writing there in the passway below, a sound of many tramping feet and the crashing of the weight being set down heavily. Doubtful the boxes with their feet of earth. There was a sound of hammering. It is the box being nailed down. Now I can hear heavy feet tramping again along the hall, with many other idle feet coming behind them. The door is shut, the chain rattle. There is a grinding of the key in the lock. I can hear the key withdraw, then another door open shut. I hear the creaking of lock and bolt. Hark! In the courtyard and down the rocky way the roll of heavy wheels and crack of whips, the shores of Shergan as they passed into the distance. I'm alone in the castle, those horrible women. Faug, Mina is a woman, and there is none in common. They are devils of the pit. I shall not remain alone with them. I shall try to scale the castle wall farther than I have yet attempted. I shall take some of the gold with me. At least I want it later. I may find a way from this dreadful place, and then a way for home, a way to the quickest and nearest train, away from the cursed spot, from this cursed land, where the devil and his children still walks the earth with earthly feet. At least God's mercy is better than of those monsters, and the precise is steep and high. At its foot a man may sleep as a man. Goodbye all, Mina. Oh, hell yeah. And that was chapter 4 finished. Well done. Well, that means we are finished today with the stream. This was very exciting. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And for the people that read or listen to this later, I hope you guys enjoy so far. And next time I will be reading either on Wednesday or Friday. I shall see. It would be kind of nice to have like Friday as a little reading. So, yeah. But thank you so much all for listening to my stream. And like I said, I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. And yeah, thank you for tuning into the stream. You all take care. Bye bye.